especially with these younger generations that are starting to come into the workforce. People need a why. They need something that they can get behind that has some sense of purpose and meaning to it in order to find that intrinsic motivation to sustain their way through things like uncertainty and change. Uncertainty and change without a purpose can lead to burnout, right? But it's when we're passionate because there's something meaningful in it for the people that we're meant to serve. That's a totally different response neurochemically in our bodies, doesn't it? Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, changing the way the game is played. This podcast helps purpose-driven leaders unlock their highest potential so that they can play their biggest impact game. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, changing the way this game is being played. Liane and I are back in the studio, and we got a very exciting guest in the house for you today. I call her Nil. Her official name is Nilufer Erdebil, and she's been a client of mine for the last year, I believe, since she was first on the Leadership Launchpad Project. She's an award-winning TEDx and tech speaker. She's also an author. She's got a next up on deck book coming down the pipeline. I'm hoping she'll give us a little taste test around today. But yeah, she is the CEO and founder at Spring 2 Innovation, which really specializes in something known as design thinking, which is what I can't wait for her to unpack for our audience, because this is such a 2.0 methodology and strategy that our leaders, if you haven't heard about it yet, simply need to be plugged into. Nil, welcome back to the podcast, girl. It's so good to have you back for round two.
Thank you so much for having me on for round two as well, too.
Well, we had such positive feedback from the first round. We had to invite you back in. And the place I feel like we got to start, just in case our listeners didn't get to catch you the first time around, is just plug our audience into you and the backstory behind how you came to found Spring 2 Innovation in the first place.
For sure. So I'll start with a backstory. I started Spring 2 Innovation over 13 years ago, and my career actually started in technology and high tech. I was doing software development and design, and then eventually moved into IT and infrastructure. And it would take 6 months to implement the technology aspect of it, and then a couple of years for people to start using it. And on top of that, with the technology companies, sometimes we were too ahead of the curve, and sometimes customers weren't buying what we had created, even though it was highly scalable and the solutions were amazing engineering and technology wise. And that's when I got exposed to better understanding customers and giving the customers what they want and solving the problems that they have, rather than what you think they should have to make their life better. And so I've started Spring 2 Innovation 13 years ago, and we've been doing a lot of training, facilitation, and coaching to medium and large size organizations since then. And I love that more and more people are starting to think about that people aspect of it, that people first component of it. And you guys speak about it quite a bit as well, too, because at the end of the day, we're people creating services and products for people.
Amen, sister, preach. I feel like this is why I love working with you so much. We're so aligned in terms of, the method to the madness in terms of this human-centric approach to development of any kind. But let's just start there in terms of breaking down, why is it that it is not intuitive for us to create solutions with our people, our customers in mind? Where is that gap or that blind spot in terms of our mindset?
I think it starts out in school and in our education system. Like a lot of the time, you're taught the skills that you need to be able to do the job from a technology or a principles, theory side of it. Oftentimes, the people that are teaching you aren't necessarily applying it in the real world. And then when you get into the real world, it's the same people. And I have to say, business in the 80s and 90s was quite different than it is now. And you guys talk about evolving into Leadership 2.0, how business is being done in a healthy way is more important than ever. I think there's a lower tolerance for toxicity in work environments, and there's an increased desire for collaboration because people are realizing more and more that you could get a lot further ahead if you can galvanize everybody and make sure that they're all going in the same direction on their own rather than someone telling them to and going at it from a place of fear. And so that's a lot of the work that we do as well in larger organizations, to get everybody going in the same direction, aligned and moving in the same direction from a people perspective.
Mm. You said, going back to school where we learned to do things from a tech or a principal perspective.
Yeah.
Do you mean like from the principles of like somebody who's, let's say, trying to develop a product or a service who's decided this is what people should want, or is this is something that people should use, but that's coming from a principle in themselves of a should as opposed to a want? Like, is that the difference? And can you give an example? Obviously, not using any names to protect the innocent, but I'm just so curious about what that actually looks like when somebody comes at it from this is what people should want, as opposed to doing the research to see do people actually really want that, or do they want something a little different than that?
Yeah, I think an example from my telco days is probably a good example. Um, there was this new technology that came out that allowed different types of telecommunications companies to compete on the same level, providing home phone services, and it was called voice over IP, VoIP. And so there was this
Mm,
big race
heard
to,
of that.
yeah, to
Mhm.
figure out who's going to be able to get VoIP into people's homes. Meanwhile, the people that are in their homes, the consumers that are purchasing it, they don't care what technology it is. They just wanted to do the same thing that it's always done. If it has additional features, that's great if it's useful. But at the end of the day, what ended up happening is it was more about the technology for the larger firms rather than the additional benefits that it
Mm,
would have given the end users itself. And that's just one example. I think it happens so often through through our lives, and you'll notice it. I know a lot of companies do focus groups and research in particular types of settings and environments in geographical regions to see how people are going to react to their products and their services. But sometimes people feel so sure of themselves that that testing it with the consumers gets skipped a little bit more than it should. Or it's certain groups
mm,
that understand what's going on with the customers and it's not brought to the rest of the organization. Because I remember in my technology days, sales would go and sell something that we weren't actually producing. And as an engineer, we'd be like, what are they doing? What
mm.
are they selling? And it's now, as a business owner, I think, oh, why weren't we doing what people are asking for? So it's
I feel I feel like it's a lot of what we talk about in our locker rooms too, in terms of where that type of power over strategy comes from in the old school 1.0 leadership, right? Which is a lot of like our biases and limited beliefs and perspectives, which a lot of the times we don't even understand where that's coming from or what's influenced that, right? So we're just so sure that we know, or we're expecting ourselves to have it all figured out, right? That we kind of skip that human centric step of just plugging in with our empathy and being consciously present in present day to the
yeah.
needs of the people that we're actually trying to serve. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally, yeah. And oftentimes companies do surveys to find out information about their end users, but often it's not filled out or they're just asking yes or no questions. I did an activity over the last few days with an organization that helped them understand their end users' perspectives a little bit more and the need for understanding their end users better. And what came out of it was a lot of the time they were asking questions to confirm their biases rather than that empathy, that curiosity component.
Mm.
to be able to learn more too. And so it's decoding some of the ways that we've done things in the past and putting the customer first. And we hear a lot about customer centric, but truly living by that as a value throughout the whole organization.
I love that. It's so important. Like you're talking about being a company that likes to drive innovation, spring to innovation. And I just think it's comical, right? Because do we even understand what innovation requires? Like innovation requires, right, that we are actually present and available to the data that's in front of us, but also the diverse perspectives of yourself and your audience, whether you're a leader leading a team or a leader of a team that's trying to serve its customers, right?
Yeah.
Can you help break that? Because you're way more the expert in terms of innovation here, but just
Yeah.
help plug our leaders into, because we're in a space right now with AI where it's never been more important for us to understand the basics of what innovation requires as a baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been listening to more and more podcasts on AI and how the technical part is so much easier now that the beginning of a project where you're finding out about the customers, understanding where your market fit is, and empathizing with those end users, that's going to be the part that people are going to play a huge role in. And that's actually going to be a more significant part of a project. And it's really interesting to see how many opportunities there are if you just listen to your customers and are present with them so that you can better understand their actual needs rather than what you think they need. I've seen this quite a bit, especially earlier in my career too. We'd bring in customers and what we had created isn't what they're looking for, and what they wanted is a lot easier to develop. And so fortunately we had leadership at the time that was really good with changing gears, but the other aspect of understanding our customers better and that empathetic approach too is times are changing so fast. Oh my God, the AI, the global situation, the economy. And so it's only when you can stop and listen that you can understand how people are changing and how they're shifting and how they're going to be shifting and bring that back in and look for those opportunities to innovate, especially before your competition. And that's a huge difference around the environment that we're in. And we're also in a complex environment because of all those changes happening all at the same time. And I often hear companies saying that their people have change fatigue. Totally understand that. And I think part of that involves not understanding why they're changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the empathy part comes in a lot more too, where you're stopping to understand the people that you're creating an impact for and the impact that you are going to create for them so that people are aligned around that rather than our deadline is in 2 weeks. Well, I'm tired. But then if you find out, well, this is going to make a difference in a number of people's lives, if they get it out there a lot faster, then the way that you look at what you're doing shifts quite a bit. Your mindset shifts so that you're much more energized and enthusiastic about delivering for people rather than for timelines that may or may not make sense to you.
That's so interesting. So is that what you find that you get hired to do, is you come in and you're to facilitate these separate entities that we're sort of talking about here in terms of how to work, develop the idea, how to connect that to the audience? Is that the main thrust then? Yeah. Okay.
That's part of
And
it.
connecting them with the purpose. I want you to dig into that, because I feel like this is what I'm trying to lay down some consciousness around on this damn show right about now, right? Is like we're very much in a purpose-centric space in the leadership development world. This is actually something that you're seeing Forbes talk about in their write-ups, right? Is that especially with these younger generations that are starting to come into the workforce, people need a why. They need something that they can get behind that has some sense of purpose and meaning to it in order to find that intrinsic motivation to sustain their way through things like uncertainty and change. Uncertainty and change without a purpose can lead to burnout, right? But it's when we're passionate because there's something meaningful in it for the people that we're meant to serve. That's a totally different response neurochemically in our bodies, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think for organizations, that why is a huge component of it. And it's too often that people don't stop to think about, well, what's the challenge that I'm looking to solve? It's more task driven than the why, the purpose component of it. Once people are better able to articulate that challenge and then figure out what success looks like, then it's a lot easier for the team to collaborate around that as opposed to, well, here's your assignment and here's your task. Here's the project timeline rather than the impact, the purpose, and the people too that you're trying to create impact for, and the people that you're working with too, because we spend a lot of time with our colleagues, and it's lovely if you can get along, and it's even better if you can create environments and cultures where people want to hang out with one another after work too, because it's so easy to align on things outside of the work environment because they are so cohesive as they're going through their work because they see that same vision together and work towards that.
We see so many high achiever leaders that are definitely trying to do way too much, right? And that is the problem, is that they're kind of lost in the sauce in terms of not even doing the right things. And again, if it's not aligned with that purpose, leading to the burnout.
And so how does this all fit with one of the themes that we talked before we got on the podcast around this idea, which I'm very intrigued about, of doing less with more. So how does this lead me to how this all fits together and where that piece comes in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of design thinking, training, consulting, and coaching. And design thinking is a lot about understanding the people. We've actually developed another methodology that encompasses design thinking. It's called the Deeper Clarity Method, and it starts out with alignment, then design thinking, and then looking at what might be happening in the near future and the trends that we're seeing, and a mindset component of it. So that alignment piece up front is a lot about making sure that you're doing the right things.
Mm.
Go into organizations so often where work is duplicated, or sometimes because things are moving so fast, people are working on things that no longer matter. They're going crazy trying to make sure that they're delivering on these tight timelines when at the end of the day, the customer no longer wants that. And so if you can create that alignment within the team and with the customers and within the organization, then you can actually prioritize on the right problems and you're going to end up doing a lot less. Imagine the reduction of waste if people are much more focused and collaborative towards the same goal. That gets rid of a lot of people that might have been needed in the past and gets rid of a lot of things that might not be as important. And I think that's why that measure of success is so vital, really getting down to what actually matters and then delivering on that. The other stuff is a nice to have and not 10 must-haves.
Mm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
gonna really, really increase the organization's efficiency to be able to prioritize on the important projects, products, services, initiatives, and then really work towards getting those right.
I feel like this is why we work so hard, Liane, in terms of getting our leaders into that self-leadership that is super duper aligned, right? Intrinsically, not only in terms of the purpose behind it all, but the values that inform the decisions of our autopilot. You know, we see so many high achiever leaders that are definitely trying to do way too much, right? And that is the problem, is that they're kind of lost in the sauce in terms of not even doing the right things. And again, if it's not aligned with that purpose, leading to the burnout. But that's what I want to explore, because you definitely understand the impacts of that self-leadership piece from a mindset perspective. just something you work really hard on week by week. I get to bear witness to and celebrate, right? But is that an aspect of the work that you do when you're at the table with these leaders, is making sure that they have that intrinsic alignment before rippling that out in terms of the greater alignment of the organization towards the customers?
We do a little bit of that, not to the depth that you do it for sure. It is really important. We do training for leaders, and it is really important for leaders to take a moment to understand how they're showing up on a daily basis, showing up for their team, showing up to work in their work environments, and understanding the impact that it has on their people. In terms of self-alignment, I think we do a lot of work in trying to create space for that pause. So to be able to think through, am I doing the right thing? But it's such a small portion of what we cover. I find people really appreciate that quite a bit. Is okay, how can I figure out what I want to be doing? And if we're able to spend 5 days with them during our design thinking certification, usually at the end of the 5 days, we'll spend a chunk of time helping people be able to better create different versions of their lives. And as they do that, they start to understand what's actually really important. And we've even had people start businesses from that training because they've realized there's something else that I want to be doing. One person started doing yoga, like delivering yoga retreats, and another wanted to start a catering business. And so, what are the steps that you need to put in place? Those are personal goals that came out of it, but there's a lot of business goals that come out of that too. And it's more about taking that time to figure out, and we are in there for such a short period of time to help them figure out what those connections to themselves are. But it's also, how do you translate those missions and visions and mandates to align with your values and your team's values in order to be able to move forward? And I could talk about the values component of it for quite a long time. I am by no means an expert in that area, but I think it's an area that's overlooked in terms of aligning your personal values with your work values as well.
Well, I'd love to go a little deeper because as you're talking, I'm thinking, what are let's say, are there any key aha moments or shifts that you see people go through from having watched people go through this type of training over and over again? I know with Susan and I, we have our coaching process and we could identify, yes, those key sort of learnings and teachings where we know that there's been a raised, consciousness or awareness about themselves or some aspect of what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And so I'm curious if you can identify a few of those that people would get from that training with you.
Yeah, we do a lot of group work and teamwork, and then sometimes throughout the organization as well too. And it's so fun to see, to give people time to think through what their team does, and then be able to look at what other teams do as well too. There's a lot of assumptions people make in terms of what people on their own team do. And when you give them that space to explore and better understand one another, then they understand why they're coming to them with the types of questions that they're coming to them with, because they have a different goal that they're trying to accomplish. And then when you add in multiple different teams that think they know what each other does, but usually there's a lot of aha moments that happen during this type of training or facilitation. I remember one a few years ago where there was a whole bunch of IT managers and then an HR person, and the IT managers didn't quite fully understand what each of their groups did, like their respective groups. And then we brought in HR to explain what they did, and everybody else in the room was shocked. They were like, "That's what you do?
Oh my gosh.
I can go to you with these problems?" And
Wow.
yes, and uh, it's just that shift of mindset of finding out new information just from taking that time, that pause
Mm.
to listen,
Mm.
curious.
Well, I think too is like really seeing people. You have your idea and as you say, and your assumptions about what it is that that person does, but having a real understanding of that, that lays the groundwork for the connection that you need. I think that that's the piece that I find interesting in all this is to start getting people aligned. Because one of my questions for you was, how do you get all these people aligned? There must be a lot of resistance that people would have for, well, but I want to protect my turf. I want to protect my project. And you're telling me that this isn't the priority anymore. But you have people creating those connections and really starting to understand each other. Does that kind of start to lay the foundation for people wanting to come together as a collective as opposed to defending individual interests?
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still some challenges
Right.
with the teams that we work with, but uh, it moves them forward. Sometimes it's not a 1 day, 1 week type of a thing. It's an evolution of how the teams work with one another, and also an evolution of the culture within the organization too. So part of the alignment component is better understanding the customers that you're looking to solve, but also understanding not just what each other does, but also how you're thinking and feeling in a way that allows the other teams to be able to understand your perspective. And because oftentimes I've been pulled into projects where one team has created a tool for another team without talking to them. And you're just like, I wonder why they're not using that tool. And it's not necessarily that it isn't amazing. It's the people want to feel like they're part of creating something. And when you do that alignment and people are seeing that customer and aligning around the customer, then they're seeing the impact that they're creating and how they're going to be making the people that they're creating value for feel, how they're going to change their lives. And so aligning around their customers, I find is a huge part of alignment, and then helping them align with the organization's vision too. And so we were chatting about when we get called in. A lot of the time we get called in at the start of projects, especially if they're complex or if things aren't going well. And with a lot of changes happening right now around the world, especially socioeconomically, you can't actually solve problems in such a complex environment with project management methodologies because
They're human problems.
human problems, and
Hmm.
there's so many of them. And so, how can you bring them together and then make sense of what you have in order to be able to figure out what that first step is that you need to do to provide more clarity to move forward. And I think once people have a better understanding of where they need to go, it gets rid of the things that are lower priority. It gets rid of some of the uncertainty. And then with that focus, then people can make sure that they're spending their time on the right things and they're not concerned about things that aren't actually going to make a difference for them.
You really have made the case now for why you really do speed up by slowing down. We have such a hard time in our locker rooms making the case for that methodology right there.
Yeah.
But that's what alignment's all about, right? Is like it's slowing down consciously so that you can make sure that you are firing those rapid autopilot decisions, which we know are only accelerating in this type of climate and environment and high pressure, high stakes conditions, right? And making sure that you're being strategic and hitting the right targets. I want you, before we let you go today, for all the leaders that are listening, just leave us with maybe 3 of your favorite starting point tips. If this is the design thinking methodology is nothing that this leader's ever heard before, but they're curious and eager to start trying it out in their own organization, what would those tips or suggestions be?
I think for design thinking, a lot of it is mindset of being empathetic, understanding how you're showing up and understanding who you're creating value for. And so I would maybe tell leaders to consider how their team is considering their end users and how they're being curious about their end users in order to create that impact. Other aspects of design thinking that I love is reframing the problem. Because so often we don't necessarily know the problem our customers have. We just have an idea of it. And we don't always take the time to be able to articulate it in a succinct way. And then once you've talked to all of these customers and understood them better, then you want to spend that time to figure out if it was the right problem or if we need to reframe it. And then I think the third thing that I really value in how we apply design thinking is making sure that everyone's aligned on the measures of success. What does success look like for everybody? And let's understand that so that we're going towards those success metrics rather than 10, 12, however many. And so if you want to get clarity in ambiguous, chaotic environments, start with the end user, and they're going to help you create your why, your purpose, and then bring that back in to align the team.
I feel like if anybody's eager to really dig into that at more depth and breadth, they could probably pick up your first book, which I want you to mention, and then plug us into this next book that I know I hear week by week you're almost to the finish line with. I definitely want our audience to hear about what's up next on deck for you, Miss Author.
For sure. Thank you. So the first book is called Future Proofing by Design, Creating Better Services and Teams in the Public Sector. And it is written for the public sector, but the methodology and mindset applies to the private sector as well. The second one that's about to come out in the fall is around private sector businesses. And so it's called Turning on the Growth Tap. How do you sustainably grow businesses? And it's a lot around the alignment component of it, doing more with less. And how do you get people to think about the customer and cascade it throughout the whole organization so that everyone's able to make decisions on a daily basis that's going to move you forward rather than just one or two major initiatives or pillars. How can people better understand how they can be innovative themselves individually and as a team to make the lives of their customers better and also to make the lives of their teammates better too.
That's the beautiful ripple effect, but ROI, right? In terms of why human-centric leadership practices in any way, shape, or form are best practices. Where can they find that book? I'm assuming Amazon.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indigo.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. And then if anybody out there's listening and saying, you know what, I really got to hire this Nilufer woman, where would you suggest that it's best for them to reach out to you? LinkedIn is probably the best.
LinkedIn. You can go to our website as well, Spring2 with the number 2 innovation. We have a YouTube channel and we have free monthly webinars that you can sign up for through our Deeper Clarity LinkedIn group.
Amazing. Thank you, Nil. This has been so deeply informative in a time and a space and a place where this world has never needed this type of thought leadership more than it does today. This is definitely the mission that we're on here, right, Liane? I want to hear from you. Yep. Do you have any final words for our folks today?
Well, yeah, I would say thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us. And I think, you know, everything that you talked about today fits so in with what Susan and I constantly talk to, and it makes sense that you two work together as well around your model really fits into ours, which is like building awareness so that we can practice the intelligence. And sounds to me like this is your entire model here is around getting that awareness of, you know, what people are thinking and what the customer's thinking and what are people thinking in between groups and, you know, different areas of an organization so that everybody has that raised level of awareness. And then from that, you apply the intelligence. So it's such a great model. Yeah, so thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Liane. Thank you, Susan.
And what they're feeling too. I just want to tack on to what Liane said. This is why we start with the mindset and get into our leaders' perspective and biases and backstories and beliefs is like so that we can meet our leaders where they're at, right? So we can understand where their fears or limitations in terms of how they're feeling, if they're feeling resistant to change or burnt out by change. is even coming from, because that's the ticket, that's the strategy in terms of understanding what they need so that we can be responsive leaders, whether that's amongst our teammates, in our organizations, or externally with our customers that we're trying to get out there every day and serve. I feel like this is why we're so aligned, you and I, Nell, and enjoy working together as much as we do. But I also feel like this is why I'm catching a little inspo in terms of some innovation here too. We need to tag team up on these locker rooms. And we're trying to change the way this game is being played through this methodology, this human-centric approach to leadership. We call Leadership 2.0. But that's exactly the mission that you're on too. And so thank you for bringing your mission to the mic and to our audience. I know this is going to serve our leaders oh so much. And thank you, listeners, for being on this mission alongside us. This has never been more important than it is today. I am constantly and chronically reminded of this as I get deeply in tune to the needs of my leaders in these trenches, as Liane and I get into these leadership locker rooms. This is absolutely, the game has changed. It's not about it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. The table stakes are that we all understand this human approach to leadership and business, because this is what this accelerated, rapid disruption of change in our world and our technology is going to require if we want to stay in this game as leaders. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And for any more information on these Leadership 2.0 principles, programs, leadership locker rooms that I'm riffing on, or even that one-on-one experience with Liane and I in the executive coaching realm, please head over to our website, elitehighperformance.com. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and we will see you all next week.